The quiet one in room 12. Some evil burns bright. Some screams. Marches. Wears armbands. Gives orders. And some waits. It waits behind polite smiles. It hides in old bones. In liver spots. In slippers. Kurt Weiss is 90 years old. He can barely walk. He is dying of cancer. But make no mistake, he has killed before, and he's not finished yet. If you have ever met someone you thought was pure evil, please subscribe. The transport van pulled into Willow Acres at 6:04 a.m., tires crunching softly on the gravel as dawn fog clung low over the hedges. The building looked like all the others, clean bricks, trimmed hedges, laminated schedules taped to the glass doors. Death wore a plastic smile here. Inside the van, Kurt Weiss sat perfectly still, hands folded over his lap like he was in church. His cardigan was beige, the kind old men wore to shuffle through chapel halls or sit in sunrooms with plastic puzzle books. His shoes were polished, not like someone had done it for him, like he had done it himself. Leather clean, laces straight, not a scuff in sight. The aide barely looked at him. Another transfer, another near corpse. Paperwork said terminal cancer, mid-stage dementia, unresponsive. A shell of someone who used to be. The aide adjusted the brake on the wheelchair and wheeled him inside without ceremony. Reception was empty except for the duty nurse sipping lukewarm coffee behind the front desk. She glanced at the chart, gave a tired nod. Room 12. Oncology wing. End of life. The aide paused. He didn't speak the whole ride. Just sat there. Didn't blink. The nurse gave a half smile without warmth. They don't talk much, the quiet ones. They didn't even realize what they were saying. Nurse Clara was already prepping meds when a knock came at the oncology wing. She wiped her hands, adjusted her scrub top, and stepped in the hallway just in time to see the aide backing away from the wheelchair. Kurt Weiss looked up at her very slowly. Not confused, not frightened. His gaze settled, cold and smooth, like a man judging produce at a market. Clara smiled out of habit. "Hi, Mr. Weiss. Welcome to Willow Acres. I'm Clara. I'll be taking care of you." He didn't blink. Then, finally he spoke. His voice was soft, just gravel above a whisper. The kind that people leaned in to hear. "You're German," he said. Clara paused. "No, I'm not. American. But I had a grandmother from Dusseldorf." Kurt nodded slightly. "I can hear it in the back of your vowels. Like chalk, hidden under the English." It wasn't a compliment. She moved behind him and wheeled him to room 12. The room was clean, sparse, bed freshly made. A window faced the staff parking lot. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and microwave fish. Kurt stood slowly when she offered help. He didn't need it. His body moved stiffly but controlled. Not like a frail old man, but like a man restraining something. He eased himself onto the bed and sat upright, back straight, hands still folded. She made a few notes on her tablet. "If you need pain meds, we can offer a combination of morphine and—" "I don't take sedatives," he said sharply. Clara stopped. The firmness didn't match the weak file in her hand. "Okay," she replied calmly, "but the pain may worsen. We're here to keep you comfortable." "I want to stay sharp," he said. "Comfort dulls judgment." That was the first sentence that chilled her. Later that day, as the morning shift stabilized, Clara reviewed his intake record in the med station. His medical chart was unremarkable. Advanced pancreatic cancer, 2 prior strokes, underweight. Nothing unexpected. But the transfer paperwork, that was different. Patient transferred from St. Joseph Psychiatric Facility under court-supervised end-of-life release. Diagnosed delusional ideologies, unresolved trauma triggers. Subject previously sedated daily under state supervision. Considered contained. Medically cleared for supervised civilian palliative care. Clara frowned. There was no current sedative prescribed. Contained? What exactly had he been contained for? She highlighted the note and set it aside for Dr. Reyes. Maybe the psychiatrist could clarify. Probably just state overclassification. Bureaucracy, as usual. That night, just before lights out, she peeked into room 12. Kurt was still sitting upright in bed, no TV on, no book in hand. Just sitting. His eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. His mouth slightly curled into a smile, like he'd just remembered the punchline to an old joke. She stood there for a second too long. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge her, just smiled into the darkness like he was listening to music no one else could hear. She backed out slowly, goosebumps rising on her arms. It wasn't just that he looked awake. It was that he looked alive. Awake like a man about to start something. Not finish. Clara hated Wednesdays. Half-staffed, the food truck always late, and the volunteer pianist came to bang out lopsided hymns on the wheezing upright in the lounge. Residents either dozed through it or sat staring blankly at the wall, lost in morphine or memory. That morning began like all others. Fluorescence flickered to life in silent sequence. Somewhere down the hallway, a bedpan clattered to the floor. The smell of powdered eggs wafted in from the kitchen. Clara punched in and grabbed her patient log. Nothing unusual. Blood pressure checks, med handouts, change of dressings. 5 patients on her board today. 6, counting Kurt. Room 12 remained still when she passed it. No light, no movement, not even snoring. She paused, pressed her ear gently to the door. Silence. She noted it and moved on. At 9:10 a.m., it happened. Mr. Finley from room 8 collapsed during breakfast. 1 minute he was stabbing at scrambled eggs. The next his spoon clattered, and he seized violently in his chair. His feet kicked the table hard enough to spill a tray. Foam bubbled at the corners of his mouth, and his eyes rolled back, showing only veined white. Clara sprinted over with Nurse Davids. They cleared his airway, rolled him, and paged for the crash cart. He was gone before it even arrived. Dead. Just like that. The official write-up later said stroke. He was 82. Had heart issues. The kind of man no one blinked over when he went cold. Clara didn't argue. She wasn't even sure she doubted it. Not really. Just a feeling. A splinter. The way his fingers twitched. The fact that he'd seemed sharper than usual that morning. He even joked with the food staff. And now gone. Later, when she passed room 12, the door was open. Kurt was awake, sitting up in bed. Not reading. Not eating. Just staring at the hallway. As she walked by, he said softly, "The loud ones always go first." Clara stopped. "I'm sorry," she asked, leaning back in. Kurt blinked slowly. Nothing. Just remembering something. That evening, as the halls dimmed and visitors thinned, Clara did her routine inventory in the med room. Bottles. Vials. Inhalers. Patches. She noticed it then. 2 ampoules of labetalol gone. Logged yesterday. Not administered. She double-checked. It wasn't the kind of med someone would misplace. And it sure as hell wasn't the kind anyone would steal. Not unless you wanted to trigger a heart episode. Clara flagged it. Left a note in the chart. Told herself to bring it up to the head nurse. Maybe it was a charting error. God knew it happened. She locked up. Turned off the light. Behind her, down the hallway, room 12's window light was on. And Kurt was there again. Sitting motionless in bed, face to the glass. Watching. 2 nights later, it happened again. Mrs. Halloway from room 5 collapsed in the hallway during her evening walk. She hit the floor like a sack of flour, limbs shaking, eyes wide with confusion. Claire got there first. Checked her vitals. Weak pulse. Sweating. Elevated blood pressure. Pupils dilated. She looked drugged. The resident doc brushed it off as a med interaction, ordered fluids and observation. But Clara had checked her chart that morning. Mrs. Halloway was on only 2 prescriptions. Neither of them explained this. When they carried her back to her room, Clara passed Kurt's door again. It was slightly ajar. She could swear, just for a moment, that he was smiling. Not a warm, sleepy old man smile, but something else. Something old. Controlled. Like he was watching an old film in his head and savoring the ending. By Friday, 3 more pills had gone missing. And no one believed Clara. The 3rd death was quieter than the rest. Mr. Dolan was found dead in his bed. One hand resting on his stomach, the other dangling over the edge like he'd simply drifted off during the night. His vitals the evening before were fine, slightly elevated blood pressure, but that was normal for him. He'd joked with Clara during his nightly meds, asked her if he could skip bingo and go straight to heaven instead. She didn't laugh then. She certainly didn't laugh the next morning. They listed it as heart failure. Expected. He was 79, diabetic, former smoker. The file practically filled itself. But Clara remembered the odd discoloration around his lips. A faint blue tint, like oxygen hadn't been there when he needed it. The chart said nothing about respiratory meds. No narcotics. No morphine. She went straight to the med room. It wasn't just the missing labetalol now. A half strip of lorazepam was gone. A vial of insulin. A crushed, empty blister pack of digoxin stuffed behind the bottom drawer. Sloppy. Sloppy enough to make her skin crawl. She took photos, printed and filed copies in her locker, covered her tracks. That night, she sat in her car outside Willow Acres for nearly 30 minutes before driving home. Her fingers gripped the wheel too tightly. The engine idled. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She had questions, too many, but no answers. What could she say? An old man is probably murdering terminal patients with misplaced meds. No court in the world would care. Not unless she caught him red-handed. And even then, they'd say he was senile, dying, harmless. The system didn't fear old men. It wrote them off. And Clara was just a nurse, not a doctor, not a detective, not anyone who mattered. The third death was quieter than the rest. Mr. Dolan was found dead in his bed, one hand resting on his stomach, the other dangling over the edge like he'd simply drifted off during the night. His vitals the evening before were fine, slightly elevated blood pressure, but that was normal for him. He'd joked with Clara during his nightly meds, asked her if he could skip bingo and go straight to heaven instead. She didn't laugh then. She certainly didn't laugh the next morning. They listed it as heart failure. Expected. He was 79, diabetic, former smoker. The file practically filled itself. But Clara remembered the odd discoloration around his lips, a faint blue tint, like oxygen hadn't been there when he needed it. The chart said nothing about respiratory meds. No narcotics. No morphine. She went straight to the medroom. It wasn't just the missing labetalol now. A half strip of lorazepam was gone. A vial of insulin. A crushed, empty blister pack of digoxin stuffed behind the bottom drawer. Sloppy. Sloppy enough to make her skin crawl. She took photos, printed and filed copies in her locker, covered her tracks. That night, she sat in her car outside Willow Acres for nearly 30 minutes before driving home. Her fingers gripped the wheel too tightly. The engine idled. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She had questions, too many, but no answers. What could she say? An old man is probably murdering terminal patients with misplaced meds. No court in the world would care. Not unless she caught him red-handed. And even then, they'd say he was senile, dying, harmless. The system didn't fear old men. It wrote them off. And Clara was just a nurse, not a doctor, not a detective, not anyone who mattered. She decided to speak to him. 2 days later, during his morning check-in, she closed the door behind her and sat beside his bed. Kurt was already awake. He rarely slept. His eyes were sharper than she remembered, alert, steady, almost clinical. He looked at her like he was measuring something, weighing. "You sleep okay?" she asked, trying to keep it neutral. "I dream of cold rooms," he said, "and warm hands." She didn't reply. Instead, she leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Mr. Weiss, do you know anything about the missing medication?" He blinked slowly. "I don't handle medicine," he said. "That's your job. You haven't been sleeping. You don't take your painkillers. You're wide awake every night, sitting there, watching. Because I like the quiet. You were committed for a reason, weren't you?" Kurt smiled. "My reasons are none of your business." She stood. Her skin prickled. "If anything else happens," she said, "if anyone else gets hurt." Kurt's voice cut in, calm, unshaken. "You should be careful what you threaten, nurse." Clara froze. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't even frown. He just said it like he was offering friendly advice. Like he was warning her about the weather. She left the room without another word. 3 days later, the fourth death happened. And this time, it wasn't subtle. Mrs. Allen, 66, late-stage lymphoma, mostly confined to bed, went in a violent seizure mid-lunch. She was in a recreation room, seated in her wheelchair, when her arms flailed outward, her jaw locking tight. She screamed once. Only once. Her eyes rolled. Foam spilled over her lips. Blood, real, bright red blood, trickled from her nose. People screamed. A visitor fainted. Clara arrived before the code blue even finished being paged. She found Kurt in the hallway, watching, expression calm. When they wheeled Alan's body out 2 hours later, Kurt turned to Clara and said, too softly for anyone else to hear, 4. That's one more than I expected. I'm feeling generous. Clara locked herself in the staff bathroom and threw up. It took Clara 3 days to get access to the redacted file. Not the one that came with Kurt's transfer, the real one buried behind layers of state psychiatric systems and archived evaluations. It wasn't legal. She used an old login from a friend who owed her a favor and no longer worked in the system. She told herself she needed the truth to protect her patients. But deep down, she just wanted proof she wasn't going crazy. She read the file in the empty break room at 3:17 a.m., lights off, screen dimmed. It was worse than she expected. Kurt Weiss, born 1933, son of SS Obersturmführer Joseph Weiss, evaded post-war prosecution by fleeing with his father to Argentina in 1945. Father died of illness. Kurt stayed behind. Worked as a field interrogator for Argentinian paramilitary groups through the 1950s and early 60s. Known for his creative techniques. Entered the United States in 1972 under a false name. Lived quietly in Pennsylvania. In 1983, arrested for multiple counts of assault, illegal possession of chemicals, and threats against minority residents in his neighborhood. Declared criminally insane after telling the court, none of these people should be alive. Institutionalized for nearly 40 years. Deemed nonviolent only after late-stage cancer diagnosis and cognitive deterioration. Released for palliative care under state resource relief criteria. There it was, buried in a line like it meant nothing. Patient holds unreformed ideological beliefs, but is considered physically harmless due to frailty and medical condition. Physically harmless. Clara slammed the laptop shut so hard her coffee spilled across the table. She didn't clean it. She just sat there, watching the brown stain bloom across a paper napkin, breath shallow and shaking. At morning check-in, she confronted the medical director. "I've been reviewing Mr. Weiss's case," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. Dr. Reyes didn't look up from his chart. "Is this about the deaths again?" "Yes. 4 of them. All patients under our care. All of them died within 3 weeks of his arrival. 3 of them were terminal, and 1 was a medication error." "No," Clara snapped. "No, it wasn't. I found a crushed digoxin packet. The missing insulin. The lorazepam. These weren't accidents. And now Mrs. Allen is dead." Reyes looked up, finally. His face was calm, patronizing. "Clara," he said gently, "you're tired. You've been working extra shifts. Grief and burnout can make patterns where there aren't any." She stared at him. "You think I'm imagining this? I think you're looking for someone to blame. And the idea of a Nazi murderer in disguise makes for a good bedtime story. But he's not in disguise," she said coldly. "He's just waiting for people to stop paying attention." Reyes sighed, clicked his pen, and made a note. "Take the weekend off. Come back fresh." Clara stood there for a long time. She didn't argue, didn't scream. She just said, "If he kills again, that's on you." And then she left. She spent the rest of the day watching room 12 from the hallway corner, waiting for something. A move, a whisper, anything. Kurt never looked out the window, never asked for water, never buzzed the call button. He simply sat in his chair, motionless, like he had all the time in the world. At 9:37 p.m., as Clara finished her shift and grabbed her coat, he looked up for the first time in hours and said, "Do you know what the problem with Americans is, nurse? They confuse silence with weakness and death with defeat." She didn't reply, but she walked out of that building with her hands shaking, her jaw clenched, and her mind racing. She knew he wasn't done. She just didn't know who was next. Clara started locking her apartment door twice. Not just out of habit, out of instinct. She stopped leaving her windows open, even during the last warm nights of the season. She checked her mail twice a day, not because she expected anything, but because Kurt Weiss had started smiling again. Not passively, not the vague, absent smile of an old man drifting into confusion. A smile like he was planning something. And Clara could feel it in her stomach. She was next. It started with the small things. Her favorite travel mug disappeared from the staff break room. No one had touched it. It had been sitting in her cubby for weeks. Her locker was left slightly open one night, just enough to notice. Just enough to know someone had touched it. There were no signs of forced entry, nothing missing, but her copy of the floor key was lying on top of her folded scrubs, out of place. She hadn't put it there. Then came the smell. Late one night, Clara returned to her apartment after a double shift. The hallway reeked of something chemical, faint, acidic like bleach and ammonia. Her kitchen window was cracked open half an inch. She lived alone. No sign of a break-in. No fingerprints. Nothing stolen. Just that smell. Lingering. Kurt hadn't left the facility, but someone had visited him the week before, a volunteer, supposedly. Clara hadn't recognized the man. Mid-40s. Neat haircut. European accent. He signed in, spoke with Kurt for 11 minutes, and left. No one questioned it. No one ever did. The next day, Clara called the director. "I want Weiss reevaluated. Psychological and physical. He's not harmless. He's organized, calculating, and extremely dangerous." Reyes sighed. "Clara, I'm not asking. I am documenting. He threatened me last week. You reported none of this officially. Because I was hoping he'd die first," she snapped. "But he didn't. And now he's circling." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Fine, Reyes finally said. We'll schedule a psych rescreening. Next week. Too late, she thought. The fifth death wasn't a patient. It was Clara's neighbor, Mr. Edmonds, a retired mechanic, quiet, mid-60s, always read in the stairwell. He lived alone in 4B, 2 doors down. He collapsed in the hallway one evening, convulsed, coughing violently. Neighbors called 911, but he was gone before the ambulance arrived. Clara stood in the hall as paramedics zipped up the body bag. She could still smell it, faint chemical, almost sweet. The next day at work, she passed room 12 during rounds. Kurt looked up at her and said, very softly, "You shouldn't have spoken to Reyes. Some neighbors aren't as lucky as others." Clara froze. Her breath caught in her throat. He didn't blink, didn't smile, just stared. She filed an immediate report. Security reviewed footage. Nothing. The visit log from that week? Missing. Reyes told her to take a mental health day. She didn't. She stayed. Because she knew, if she left, he'd try again. And next time, she might not wake up. Clara slept in the staff lounge for 3 nights straight. She kept pepper spray in her pocket, started boiling her own water, refused to eat anything from the cafeteria, watched him through the hallway window as he sat and waited, like a spider too old to move but patient enough to starve the room. And he smiled more every day. Because for Kurt, this wasn't about numbers. It wasn't about body count or ideology anymore. This was sport. This was legacy. And Clara had just become the final page in his book. The 6th body came from inside the staff. Nurse Donna Hale, 48. No pre-existing conditions. A smoker, yes. A bit overweight, maybe, but healthy. Sharp. Tough as nails. The kind of nurse who'd worked trauma wards and psych units and still found time to bake her kids cookies on the weekend. She collapsed in the medroom just after lunch. 1 second, she was capping syringes and filing inventory. The next, she was on the floor, seizing, eyes wide, mouth foaming, body twisting like someone had pulled the bones out her frame. By the time Clara and 2 others reached her, she was gone. This time, there was no explaining it away. Staff death triggered an immediate investigation. State health reps were called. Logs were pulled. Med inventories audited. And Clara, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling, slammed a full-color printout of Kurt's real file on Reyes' desk. "No more excuses," she said. "No more silence. You knew. You fucking knew." Reyes didn't deny it. He just looked at the photo of Nurse Hale's body and whispered, "Christ." Clara leaned forward. "He's killed 6 people. Possibly more. He's manipulating the med room, the staff schedule, the cameras, and you still thought he was just an old man in a bathrobe." Silence. She stood up, voice shaking. "If he's not out of here by the end of today, I'm going to the press." They didn't even restrain him when they came. 2 uniformed officers. No sirens. No cuffs. Just polite voices and a folder of paperwork. Kurt was already sitting in his wheelchair, dressed, waiting. He looked at the officers, then at Clara, and smiled warmly, almost tenderly. 6, he said. "That's enough. More than my father managed in 1 week." He turned to Clara. "You're the only one who watched properly. I'm proud of you." She didn't speak. She didn't even blink. She just stood there, fists clenched at her sides, jaw locked. The van pulled away 5 minutes later. No one waved. Kurt Weiss was sent back to state psychiatric custody, classified as a high-risk patient, retroactively flagged as homicidal. Too late for the 6 dead. Too late for Clara's safety. But at least, finally, they admitted it. He was evil, undeniably. 3 weeks later, he was dead. Pancreatic cancer, just as predicted. The attending physician noted, patient remained lucid, laughed frequently, no signs of remorse. Final words unknown. He had no visitors, no family, no video, just cremation. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. Clara missed her shift one Thursday. No call, no message, no answer at her door. Co-workers assumed she'd just finally cracked, taken a break, slept in. The police were called after 48 hours. They found her in her apartment, face down on the kitchen floor, mug still warm on the table. A faint, acrid smell in the air. No forced entry, no sign of struggle, just a note card resting beside the sink. Neatly written, no signature. Payback. Case ref, DOH/PR 17265-11. Subject, Death Investigation Summary, Willow Acres Elder Care. Overview. Between October 3rd and October 27th, 20XX, 6 residents and 1 staff member of Willow Acres Care Facility died under suspicious but unconfirmed circumstances. The deaths occurred during the temporary residence of patient Kurt Weiss, age 90, transferred under palliative release from St. Joseph Psychiatric Hospital. Subsequent investigation found evidence of missing medications, including sedatives, beta blockers, insulin, unlogged visitors, tampered medical inventory records, altered time-stamped security logs. Weiss was returned to St. Joseph on October 28th under emergency reclassification. He died of metastatic pancreatic cancer on November 19th. Autopsie summary, Clara Giton. Date of death, November 4th. Findings. Cause of death, toxic overdose of digoxin and lorazepam. No signs of trauma. Entry method unknown. Apartment locked from inside. Trace presence of camphor and denatonium. Denatonium benzoate equals bitterant on interior doorknob. Conclusion. Cause, homicide. Means, ingestion, intentional or forced. Perpetrator, unknown. Case remains unsolved. Psychiatric record, Kurt Weiss deceased. Filed by Dr. Evelyn Harper, lead psychiatric supervisor. Date, November 12th. Final evaluation notes. Mr. Weiss remained mentally intact in his final weeks. Despite advanced cancer, he showed no signs of psychological deterioration. When asked about his actions at Willow Acres, he expressed the following. It wasn't murder. It was legacy. Some people inherit houses. Others leave behind paintings. I leave examples. He exhibited no remorse. He was aware of each victim's name, diagnosis, and room number. He described their vulnerabilities in clinical detail. He stated that Clara Thorne deserved special recognition for her persistence. When asked if he regretted anything, he replied, "Only that I ran out of time." Letter found in Kurt Weiss's possession, unsent. Date, November 17th. Handwritten, folded, and signed. Dear nurse, I waited 60 years for someone like you. Not to stop me, no. That was never the point. I wanted to be seen. Not forgiven. Not studied. Seen. You did that. You were the first in a long time who looked at me and didn't look away. Most people don't want to know what evil really looks like. They want monsters with fangs. Blood on the walls. Screaming. Not quiet men with folded hands and clean shoes. But now you're part of it, too. And so is everyone who ignored you. I didn't need to win. I only needed the world to blink. And it did. Final case disposition. State board review. No criminal charges filed post-mortem. Case closed. File sealed. No further public statement recommended. The file was boxed, labeled, and shelved in Record Archive 8B. Top shelf. Back row. Behind 24 other cases no one would ever open again.
Unfortunately, this is the end of this story. I will write a new one soon. Please do remember to subscribe.